Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Charu Dogra Rawat, the Program Manager Education at India Bioscience. India Bioscience is a not-for-profit organization that is primarily funded by DBT. And we act as a catalyst and a facilitator to strengthen the life science ecosystem in India by working with and for educators, students, researchers, policymakers, and other science professionals. Our major activities include enabling networking of life science professionals across India and abroad, increasing the visibility of Indian scientific research and opportunities, aiding the development of skills necessary to navigate through science careers, establishing India Bioscience as a node for discussions on policy matters, and finally, under the education vertical, we function to connect educators and researchers, as well as other life science professionals, and also provide a platform for discussions on biology undergraduate education, and undergraduate as well as higher education. So in this regards, India Bioscience publishes articles regularly on education. In fact, most of our articles are written by practicing educators. So if you are an educator and have a flair for writing, then I invite you to write for us. Just send us a gist of your idea to education@indiabioscience.org and we will get back to you. In addition, we publish books on pedagogy and science careers, curated educational resources, discussion forums, webinars, podcasts, as well as advertisements of jobs, grants, and events for educators. Today's webinar looks at digital education through the lens of NEP 2020. But as you will soon find out, it will also look at NEP 2020 through the lens of digital education. In other words, we will not only learn what NEP 2020 envisages about digital education, but also how digital education can be useful in achieving the goals, the broad goals of this policy. Our speaker today is Dr. Charu Dogra Rawat, who is the Associate Professor at Ramjas College, University of Delhi, and a recipient of INSA Teachers Award 2021. She has received digital literacy training at Edinburgh College, Scotland, under D-Light project of the UK and India Education Research Initiative. She has delivered over 50 live lectures for the Consortium for Education Communication and conducted several workshops on research-based pedagogical tools. In addition, for those of you who follow our activities regularly, you might have noticed that Charu has written several articles for our education column, and she was also a speaker for one of our earlier webinars on digital education, which we had organized in October last year. So it gives me immense pleasure to welcome Charu, welcome back Charu to today's webinar.
Thank you, Vijay. It's a pleasure.
Before we move ahead, I would like to quickly let our audience know about the format of today's webinar. The webinar will be live streamed on YouTube, LinkedIn, as well as our website. We will have a Q&A session in the end. So I invite all the attendees today to post their questions in the Q&A box if you are on Zoom, or the chat box if you are on YouTube or LinkedIn. And we will request Charu to answer as many of them as we can, as much as the time permits. So before getting started, let's quickly have an audience poll. This is so that we know a little bit about our audience today. So let me launch the poll now, and the people on YouTube and LinkedIn can also participate in this poll using the links that have been provided. Okay, the poll is launched, and while we wait for our audience to participate, I request Charu to start sharing her screen, please. Okay, I have ended the poll now. Let's quickly have a look at the results. So most of you are educators who teach biology. Some of you are also teaching physics. And 16% of you are researchers, 5% of you are students, and 11% fall in some other category. So welcome to all of you, and I hope you will enjoy today's webinar. On this note, let me ask Charu to take over.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vijeta, and thank you to India Biosciences for inviting me to deliver this lecture on webinar on digital education through the lens of NEP 2020. I welcome all the participants, and as I see, most of you are from biology. But this digital education in any case is relevant to people and educators from all different fields, and as well as the national education policy. So the basic objective of today's webinar is to present some of the recommendations, as well as the facts related to digital education that has been incorporated into NEP 2020. So I specifically talk about those, but to first understand that, we should look at how these education policies came into being. So I touch upon a little bit of history of the education policies and the education in India. How did it come along, and how we have moved to the education which we see today, which we want to deliver today as being the educators, and what the students and they expect, how the changing world has changed the scenario of the education. So I will be talking more on that, and then we'll talk about the specific aspects of digital education in NEP, looking at some of the initiatives which has been taken into being, and then we talk about the various challenges and the limitations which are there. So starting with the we talk about the national education policies, as I said, and we look at the how it came into being. So the modern education began in India actually under the British rule, and it was started by the Charter Act, which was the first step towards education being made an objective of the government. So this was where it all started from, and for the first time, an allocation of money was done, which was rupees 1 lakh towards the education of the Indians. And it was given an impetus to the missionaries also, who were given official permission to come to India. So I'm talking about the modern education, how it came into being. Before that, there were gurukuls, there were madrasas, and there were education was happening in those places. But when the British rule was there, and when the modern education, then this is how and where it started off from. Although this money, it wasn't 1823. You can imagine it took 10 years for this money actually to be given. And because there was a distinction, or there was a confusion between what to implement, the Oriental education, which emphasizes upon the traditional education, the traditional cultures of India, or going on for the Western education, which the British rule has brought into. So there was a lot of confusion, and there were schools of people who propagated and favored the two types of education. And therefore, it took some 10 years for this money actually to be given. So there was this confusion between the Oriental or Western education. And then came a meeting which was headed by Macaulay, and it is famously known as the Macaulay Minutes. And this Macaulay Minutes, the English education was decided to be imparted in place of the traditional Indian learning. The education was restricted for a few upper and middle class people. And then he basically referred to it as the infiltration theory, because he said that rest of the masses will then get the education afterwards. They wanted to create the educators, which were Indian in color and blood, but English in taste and affiliations. So this is where the Western education came into being, and it was much prevalent, and English was considered as the medium of education. The major thing in 1854 came in, which was called as the Wood's Dispatch under the chairmanship of Charles Wood. And this was basically which was considered as the Magna Carta of the English education. It rejected this infiltration theory and promoted the education for all. This was basically, there were a lot of recommendations which were there. I'll just highlight a few of them, and which was basically the vernacular languages, the language of the masses were to be promoted, which was important. Then there was basically the promotion of female education on level. The hierarchy which we see today, I mean, obviously it is evolved, but what we see today stem from this Wood's Dispatch, that there were primary schools in villages, there were Anglo vernacular high schools, the affiliated colleges at the district level, and then universities in the presidency towns. As I said, English medium of instruction for higher studies was there. There was promotion and stress on teachers' training. So the teachers were, they actually realized the fact that the teachers need to be trained, and then, they need to impart this education. So the entire system, it started off from this important dispatch, which was happening now in 1954. Secular education was promoted, and basically private enterprises was also promoted. So this saw the, evolution, basically the foundation of what we see today. Then after independence, the Central Advisory Board of Education was established, and it planned to establish two commissions. And these two commissions were basically the University Education Commission under the chairmanship of Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, and Secondary Education Commission, which was established in 1952 under the chairmanship of Dr. A. Lakshmana Swamy Mudaliar. So these were the two commissions because they realized that there is a different setup and different rules basically which need to govern the school education as well as the university education. Then came the Indian Education Commission in 64-66 under the chairmanship of Dr. D.S. Kothari, which is popularly known as the Kothari Commission. So this Kothari Commission was the commission, and based on the observations of the reports presented by the other commissions, that the first national education policy came into being, which was in 1968. So in this was the opening paragraph of the Kothari Commission, and you could, relate well to where we are standing today. The destiny of India is now being shaped in her classrooms. In a world based on science and technology, it is education that determines the level of prosperity, welfare, and security of people. On the quality and number of persons coming out of our schools and colleges will depend our success in the great enterprise of national reconstruction, whose principal objective is to raise the standard of living of our people. So this was the opening paragraph, and I quoted from the Kothari Commission report. And this is basically, it stands today. Our education system is standing today also on this note. As I said, the first policy came into being in 1968. Many recommendations which was there. The prominent was basically the development of regional languages. So there were 3 languages which came into being now. The medium of instruction was English, but then the 2 other languages were promoted, which was Hindi and Sanskrit. So it was at this point of time that they realized, and these 3 languages, although again, there were a lot of apprehensions related to just the 3 languages and not all the regional languages, but still this 3 language system was basically promoted, and other international languages just to have the internationalization in the development of the students. This was also promoted in there. The focus on teachers' emoluments again were there related to their salaries, etc. The free and compulsory education for all children up to the age of 14 and the who enrolled should complete. The 10+2+3 pattern came into being. So this 10+2+3 pattern of education, which was adopted till now, until in NEP 2020, where they propose a different framework, but this 10+2+3 pattern came into being, and the mathematics and science were an integral part of general education. So I'm talking in general about, why I'm talking about this is because I'm showing you a perspective on how this education has developed and how today we have reached at the point where we want to incorporate digital education into being. And where did it start from? So in 1968, this national education policy was laid down. In 1986 came the second national education policy, and then it was further revised in 1992. And this basically had the major things in, again, the early childhood care and education. So it was made a child-centered approach was there, women's empowerment was promoted, and adult literacy also came into being. The emphasis was placed on setting up autonomous colleges and universities, which was missing in the prior policies, to exploit the rural talent, because there was inclusivity came into being. And again, the goal was to create rural universities. So these education mandates that we are laying down in the education policies for over decades, how we can still, how far we have achieved it, and how even, they anticipate that digital technology can help. That is what I am building upon. So again, to achieve social milieu, scholarships and incentive schemes, residence schools, hostel facilities were laid down. Various education needs of the country, the accessible and distance learning was also advocated. So distance learning came into being. Again, it was more of an inclusivity aspect, so that the education reaches to one and all. The technical and management curriculum has been reorganized following the reforms taking place in the national management system. So more of the skill, the technical and management curricula were also developed during these times. This was the policy where first the use of information and technology was adopted. So the policy was focused to bring the information technology through the introduction of media and information technology in the education. So this was the policy where it started off from, and which was again revised, as I said, in 1992. Several government schemes such as Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, Midday Meal Scheme, Navodaya Vidyalay, Kendriya Vidyalay, they were all started under this national education policy. The institution, another aspect was basically talking about the national integration. So the three prominent aspects that it talked about was national integration, quality education, and moral development. So in national integration, the institution of national importance like UGG, AICT, UCG should be, NCERT, and should be strengthened, and making them reshape the national education system. So, again, they were reinforced, these institutes, and they were joined together under governed together under one rule, so that so that there can be a national integration in terms of education delivery. And a moral development, so moral value development aspect was also introduced in this particular policy. The right of the children to free and compulsory education act came in 2009, and the right to, which is also called as the Right to Education Act, which made the education a fundamental right of every child. So, in 1992, the revised version of some revision was taken in this national education policy. Until now, we were following this, and the mandates of this education policy were followed. So when we look at the ICT, because we are talking about digital education, so where did this ICT started from? So it was basically introduced in 1858, but just before that, in 1854 or somewhere, around the line, in 1984 or something, in 1958, the policy came in. There was a project that was launched, which was called as the Computer Literacy and Studies, also termed as CLASS, which was launched by the NCERT along with the Department of Electronics and MHRD. 42 resource centers were established, and around 2,500 schools were provided with microcomputers to disseminate the knowledge and the technical skill. So this is where actually the dissemination of education in the form of ICT started from. Not even dissemination, it was basically laying the background or the framework for the incorporation of ICT in education. So this was again reinforced in 1993. In 1992, the policy was revised, and in 1993 came the Class 2000 at a much larger scale. So around 10,000 schools for the computer literacy program, 10,000 schools for the computer assisted learning program, and around 100 schools for the computer based program. So we talk too much of today related to the computer based program. So, where we are talking. So computer literacy was also important. So it started off with more emphasis on the computer literacy, and then basically the computer assisted learning, how computers can help in various aspects of education, and then how it can generate to different, even include into the pedagogy and everything. So this all started somewhere around 1993. But and the national education, this all resulted in the formulation of the national policy on information and communication technology in school education, particularly in 2012, that aimed to devise, catalyze, support, and sustain ICT and ICT enabled activities and processes in order to improve access, quality, and efficiency in the school system. It was not far that it was basically implemented to the higher education systems also. But so there were many aspects that was laid down in this ICT policy, and if you look into them, then even today, we want to achieve those things, and how the technology has changed. And so starting from 2012, how we have in this changing environment trying to adopt all the digital technologies into the education. So a lot of things that you can relate to, and you can see that these again have been emphasized with more and more digital and disruptive technologies coming into being in NEP 20 as well. ICT literacy and competency. So again, it emphasized on this ICT literacy. Then people should understand how to use the tools, how to incorporate that tools, and how to become competent enough to even incorporate, for educators, for example, to incorporate into their curriculums and into their teaching, into pedagogy. So they were actually described as the three different stages: the basic, intermediate, and advanced. In the basic, they should at least know the simple things like, how to create mails, or how to, just on the computer, use Microsoft Word. All those were in basic things. In intermediate came in when they actually have to, use search engines and all those kind of things. And advanced came when they have to create the lesson plans, incorporating the ICT tools. The ICT enabled teaching learning processes, it all came into this policy, where the advent of the smart classrooms, the EduSat and DTH enabled terminals, which provide live channels for the education all over India, which are telecasted all over India. So all these things came into being. The ICT for skill development, so various vocational courses, it was again emphasized that for these courses, again, the ICT needs to be incorporated. The ICT for children with special needs. So again, you will look at that the emphasis now is more on these things in NEP 2020, but it came into being from 2012, where the ICT, how to incorporate. Again, this points towards an inclusivity aspect, that how the children with special needs can make use of the ICT, such as audio books or some special tools are developed, softwares are developed. So, again, this is more reinforced in NEP 2020, but it came into being here. The ICT for open and distance learning. So it already started the distance learning aspect. Again, how the incorporation of ICT can be done in that. ICT for school management. So not just for the educational aspect, but the running of the schools, creating the databases of the teachers, creating learning management systems, different school management systems. It was again, emphasized in this particular policy, and the points were laid down. The ICT infrastructure, both at the core level and the enabling the use of ICT levels. So the emphasis was on the ICT infrastructure, generation of digital resources. So again, digital resources which can be made available to the educators, and promoting the educators, or motivating the educators to create these digital resources. The concept of e-libraries was coming into the being in here, and then again further the capacity building so as to incorporate these ICT tools. So it was again emphasis was laid on teacher training capacities, so that they can very smoothly incorporate these ICT tools. So this was basically again a very foundational thing for what we see in the NEP 2020. The kind of technology that has been, so it is basically growing from these aspects only. And you can imagine from 2012, even 2012, when this policy was laid down, the major change or the major uplift that started happening was from 2015, when India adopted this global education development agenda 2030, which is laid down and associated with the sustainable development goals of 2030. It in fact, it started off from 1990. This is again, now I'm talking about globally. So it somewhere started about from 1990, when the global education for all was laid down and made, it was launched. Then in 2000, it was basically the Millennium Development Goals was adopted. And in this Millennium Development Goal, one of the goal was to incorporate the ICT into education. In 2015, it talked about the lifelong learning for all. So it included the remote learning, it included the different kinds of inclusivity, again, where the ICT tools can be adopted. And it was basically the education was taken up as a specific goal in the Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 4, which talks about the quality education. And this quality education aims to ensure the inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So you can connect, when we talk in further details, that how the digital technologies are adopting and changing and have been taken up into NEP 2020 so that it can and work towards ensuring the inclusivity, equitability, as well as the lifelong learning, so that we can achieve the global education development agenda also. So it started somewhere in 2015 when India adopted it, and the numbers, as you can see on your screen, represent the numbers which were there when it was adopted, and how it points towards the achievement of this SDP goals. So the global literacy rate, the adults literate are 74%, in rural areas around 68.91%. So these were the goals basically that we are talking about. There was a lot of dropout which was there. So you can see the enrollment was 100%, which even it aims to have an enrollment. But in higher education, the enrollment is very less. So there is a lot of dropout. So it has to address those points. So whatever numbers and data they collect, as well as whatever surveys they do, because from the stakeholders, they try to formulate these policies from. So again, then children with special needs, there was a major chunk of children with special needs that were out of the school. There was largest population, and how many people were literate, how many are female, how many are males. So these are some of the numbers that they look at, and then they want to aim to increase these by and that's how basically they formulate these policies so as to increase these numbers or decrease these numbers, whatever the context or the relevance is. This then in 2015 only, Digital India was launched. So Digital India was basically transforming India into a digitally empowered society and knowledge economy. So this Digital India had 3 main things. So Digital India is a larger umbrella, but if we fuel Digital India, then probably we can have we can achieve what we want to achieve in terms of digital education, incorporation of digital education in India. And therefore, I bring in the Digital India in here. So there are 3 main vision areas of Digital India. One is the digital infrastructure as a core utility to every citizen. Then the governance and services on demand, and digital empowerment of citizens. So these 2 vision areas can really work towards achieving the goals which we laid down for the digital education. The major things which are enclosed in these 2 visions are the availability of high-speed internet as a core utility for all the citizens pan-India, the digital identity that is unique, lifelong, online, and authenticable. So this gives a concept of digital citizenship also. Again, this digital citizenship, although this is not, digital identity is not directly related to digital education, but digital citizenship gives you an ownership, which is basically the digital ownership that again, helps one to have a different mindset as far as the digital education is concerned. So safe and secure cyberspace. So these are the points that they actually want to achieve and work towards achieving through this Digital India initiative. Have universal digital literacy, universally accessible digital resources, and the availability of digital resources and services in Indian languages. So language barrier is again one impediment that needs to be bridged so that the national education policies agenda can be fruitfully achieved. So this was again one of the aspects that deal with this. And then the collaborative digital platform. So we will see that, again, how these points are carefully incorporated in NEP 2020 and how and what initiatives are done to achieve them. So collaborative digital platforms is again a very important tool, so that, it is an important tool for integration, so that the one, we have education, but again, breaking the language barriers so that education can be for all. So one size fits all was from initially when they thought of, but now it is again, addressing all the aspects and all different levels of students, etc., in terms of availability of resources, in terms of socio-economic positions and all different kinds of things, and they are trying to bridge those gaps through these initiatives. So Digital India became an important part. Now I come into being, like, we have seen this. So this is where we have grown from. So 2015 till today, it is just 6 years, 6 to 7 years. And it was laid down in 2020. So it was just 5 years where NEP 2020 has come in. And the digital, a push towards the digital education has come into being. But it was never so, even not anticipated as much, and it wasn't taking a pace until the COVID-19 happened. So COVID-19 gave the paradigm shift into this digital transformation. And this was basically not just related to education, but it was related to healthcare. So there is a digital healthcare that came into being, the manufacturing, so much of digital education, so much of digital technology came into the manufacturing aspects, even the real estate, that people started to develop homes which are digitally enabled. So have to have, access and everything related to digital aspects, to retail, the e-commerce. You all know the kind of boom that happened in case of e-commerce, and then financial services, which comes into being the digital banking and mobile banking and all those services. So digitalization and digital transformation happened in all the sectors of the society, not just the education and the learning. This COVID-19 paradigm shift in education, digital education, we all have perceived. So here I will just stop for a while, and we would run a poll actually, because the incorporation of ICT in digital in education, all of us have been doing and experiencing for these past 2 years. For this around 1.5 to 2 years, we all have exposed to this digital transformation, or in fact, if some would like to say, we have been forced to transform digitally. So I would just like to have a request. So this is again, talking about the paradigm shift in digital education. So this digital education, it started from offline and classroom teaching. And in the post-pandemic era, now we are looking at some blended learning models, etc., and how we have changed it. So before I specifically talk about the things which are laid down in NEP 2020, I just made a kind of a background so that everybody should be aware of how the education policy has transformed and what we see today, and this paradigm shift that is happening. So you all have experienced this change in digital education. So now I would like Vijeta to run this poll so that you can just share your perception and your experiences of this digital transformation in education that you are doing for the past 2 years. So the poll is on your screen. You can please, I have already laid down some of the points, but you can choose as many as you like or whatever you feel.
I also wanted to add that there are more options further down. So I request the audience to scroll down for more options for the first question. Thank you. I gently request all the audience members to participate in the audience poll, please. All right, Charu, shall we end the poll now?
Yeah,
okay.
Please.
Okay, let me quickly share the results so that you can all have a look. Yeah, Charu, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I specifically laid down certain things, and as you could see, there was basically more engagement in classes, there was more interaction. So obviously, if you don't feel like, that means that you probably think that there is not there is lesser of such engagements. So I just wanted to discuss these results, and why I put this poll at this point when I'm talking about the national education policy and digital education is because whatever is laid down in the policy, that is one thing. What initiatives, what the government is going to do, or what initiatives, that is again a second thing. But what you have experienced through these 2 years is very, very important. So again, anytime at one space learning is in sharing resources, material, taking a lot of people, 76% think so. More regular and structured classes with lesser non-academic. So at least 50%, 40% of the people think so that, it is again a more structured thing. Lack of hands-on experience in practical, that was one challenge that we almost 80% of the people we felt, because whenever we are doing wet lab experiments, they can see the videos, they could do it, but again there was not hands-on experience which was into it. Issues with technical internet, digital gadgets availability. This points out towards the digital divide, and 60% of the people feel so. And many of the people who have joined today would be probably from, again, the very digitally enriched environment. So we don't even know about the people who are in the remote areas, how will they perceive and how will they gain the fruits of the education when we talk about the education for all. The lack of personal touch, that is obviously there. The issue with authenticity and ownership of the work, 28% of the people felt so. But again, this is also a major thing, because see, again, you don't know who's submitting, you don't, that kind of a thing, you don't even know, which is also there to some extent in offline teaching. But again, this was one perception or one experience that we had. The diverse teaching tools can be incorporated. Ease in teacher-student communication, when there is lesser of personal touch and when there is lesser of face-to-face teaching, then at least, only 12% of people think. So obviously, many of you think that there was a lack of teacher and student communication when we are behind the screens rather than facing each other. So ease in time management, to some extent, there was that in ease in time management. I could lay down, there could be many other experiences and perceptions that you might have developed based on your experiences, but I could just lay down some points. And it gives me a very, very good idea. And this was basically a verdict question that, whatever audiences I have. So what date do we give? So we basically vote, like 70% of the people who are present here, 75% of the people vote for the blended mode. Also, although 20% of the people are very well versed with the complete offline mode, and some of the people would be for complete online mode, which is basically for the remote learning or for open learning or for that kind of a thing. So many of us still feel that the blended or the hybrid mode is the best option, what we experience. So this is basically what we have experienced. So now I will go into NEP. So you already have a taste of digital education. Now see the points which are laid down in NEP, see some kind of initiatives which we are taking, which the government is taking, and then we talk about the limitations and the challenges which we feel because of this perception and experience also which we already have. So, whatever a document is given to us, how do we perceive it? Where are the lacunae? Where are the lack things? Where do we perceive? Because we have already got a taste of the digital education. So that was my point, and I hope you all could see these points, that majority of the people, how we feel about this thing. So now I specifically talk about the NEP 2020. In general, talking about the NEP 2020, it was the first education policy of the 21st century. It proposes the revision and revamping of all aspects of the education structure. So you will see that from the previous policies, it has built upon. So evolution is very important. History is very important. It has built upon those aspects, keeping in mind the plus points of those policies, keeping in mind the changing environment that has happened, the fast changing environment fast changes that have occurred. And that is how they have drafted, and it has required basically a complete overhaul of the education system. including its regulation and governance, to create a new system that is aligned with the aspirational goals of 21st century education, including SDG 4, while building upon the India's traditions as well as the value systems. So we have seen that how it has come and how we are coming into now. The particular emphasis is on the development of the creative potential of each individual. You can see that in the previous policies also, it was basically talking about the cognitive skills. It was talking about the student development, the learning environments which we give them. It was based on the principle that education must develop not only the cognitive capacities, both the foundational capacity of literacy and numeracy and higher order cognitive, such as critical thinking and problem solving, but also was introduced in this education policy, which is social, ethical, and emotional capacities and dispositions. And it is running specific programs related to these aspects as well. So it wants to develop the critical thinking and problem solving, the higher order thinking skills in the students. It wants to happen the basic literacy and numeracy skills, as well as it needs to develop and make a term that has been used in NEP 2020 more often is called as the holistic development. So it looks as the holistic development. And again, it talks about the vocational skills. So I'm not going into details of this thing. You can listen to, again, India Bioscience organized a lecture by Professor Shamsu. She talked about the fundamental principles of NEP 2020 in a webinar, which is available on their YouTube channel as well. So you can just look at that there were different and fundamental principles. So again, you can now compare them, that how we have grown from the previous policies and where we are heading towards. So this is basically the, again, unique capability. So student centric, it is much more of student centric, as well as upliftment and training of teachers are also incorporated in that. Again, foundational literacy, flexibility to learners and learning trajectories. So this has been given where there are multiple options of exit also. You must have by now come to know about all these things. There was no hard separation. So multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, those words are again emphasized in NEP 2020. The multidisciplinarity and holistic education is what it talks about. Again, emphasis on conceptual understanding, creativity, critical thinking, ethics, human and constitutional values need to be incorporated. So remember, the moral development came into being in 1992 revision, but now it has been incorporated as emphasis has been laid on this aspect also. So again, promoting multilingualism. So they have understood that the language barrier is major thing in achieving the education for the all. So if we want to talk about inclusivity, if we want to talk about equity of education, we need to promote multilingualism. And in fact, we need to go beyond just the 3 languages. So the regional languages also needs to be taken care as far as the imparting of education is concerned. So life skills, various life skills are there. The focus on the assessment, how the assessments need to be done. So the formative assessments need to be done. This is the point where we elaborate, which is the extensive use of technology in teaching and learning, removing language barriers, increasing across the Divyang students and etc. So we'll look into this in more detail. It again respect diversity, full equity and inclusion, synergy in curriculum across all levels of education. So this is again one of the all levels of education. So again, pan-India at all levels of education, there needs to be a synergy in curriculum. So there are many curriculum framework also that have been developed, but then they can be imparted in their regional languages as well. Teachers and faculty as the heart of the learning process, and again their recruitment, continuous professional development, etc. A regulatory framework for the ensuring the integrity, transparency, and resource efficiency. Then outstanding research, again the research not into, we'll look into when we talk about technology, the research into the technology development, as well as research into whether the adoption of technology is going to make some change or not. So they propagate and they do emphasize upon creating more and more of pilot studies so that we can actually see what kind of changes and what kind of challenges are actually faced, and then try to work on the solutions of aspect of it. So it emphasizes on the research as well. I am correlating only in terms of digital, but these are the general principles which they are talking about. So again, rootedness and pride in India. Education is a public service, so access to quality education as a basic right. It again reinforces the fact. Then substantial investment in a strong, vibrant public education system, as well as the encouragement and facilitation of true philanthropic private. So these are some of the general principles. So Dr. Shamsu has also talked in detail about these principles, but I again specifically take out and correlate and talk about the digital education aspect. So in digital education, it goes a special provision, a special number, which is basically in the technology use and integration. So this is again a very important statement. I quote from NEP that the new technologies involving artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchains, smart boards, handheld computing devices, adaptive computer testing for student development, and other forms of educational software and hardware. So all these technologies are basically emerging, and they are new technologies. They are rising like anything. And these technologies can change what students learn in the classroom, not what they learn, but also how they learn. And thus, these areas and beyond will require extensive research, both on the technological as well as the educational fronts. So NEP is realizing the fact that because of the emergence and prevalence of these technologies, the emphasis should be on research to understand and implement these, not just blindly implement these technologies. Ki aap ye bana dijiye, aap ye kar dijiye, let's just have this, incorporate ICT. No. They are emphasizing on the fact also to conduct research, to do research in a very transparent manner and see what these technologies or what are the best possible ways how we can adopt these technologies into the education. So this statement is very important. It puts the thrust of technological interventions onto various aspects, such as the teaching, learning, as well as the evaluation processes should be, these are the thrust areas. The supporting teacher preparation and professional development. So training is very important aspect. Enhancing the educational access to reduce the digital divide. The streamlining educational management and administration. So again, at the level of administration, it needs to work for the holistic development, removing the language barriers. As I said, now the more emphasis is laid upon removing the language barriers, and the more emphasis is laid upon the access to. So the NEP lays down these thrust areas for the technological interventions that need to be done. Again, as I said, because of this emergence of disruptive technology, so this is kind of a roadmap that it wants to run. Because of this emergence of disruptive technology, it wants the extensive research, both at the technological, so develop more tools, develop more softwares, develop user-friendly software, develop software which run on low bandwidths, which can run anywhere and everywhere. So develop all those things, as well as do research on the educational fronts, implementation of these softwares, and rigorous and transparent evaluation in relevant contexts before the scale-up can be occurred. So it is emphasizing on these aspects, the NEP 2020. How on ground it envisaged that these things can be adopted in emerging technology. It talks about creating this National Educational Technology Forum. So this technology forum will categorize the emerging technology based on their potential. So this technology forum is going to categorize it, all these kind of different technologies. It is responsible for developing the skill sets also. It is responsible for conducting the research. As I said, it is responsible or basically regulating the conduction of research. Research would be done by the educationists and the technologists, different education technology companies, or the teachers involved in digital pedagogy. But this is the regulatory network which is going to do that. And then it is going to recommend all these things to the Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Education is going to further analyze it and recommend it to what is called as the National Research Foundation, which is again going to conduct further research on that. So this is going to develop the skills. This is going to identify the emerging technology. The technology is changing like anything. And then it is going to recommend, and finally these are going to do the pilot scale studies, etc., and going to scale it up for the pan-India thing. So this is what the NEP envisaged in terms of the implementation of the digital education in India. So these are the three aspects on which this NETF works. They advise the central and state government on use of technology in education. They build intellectual and institutional capacities in educational technologies, and they articulate new directions for research and innovation. So these are the primary roles what the NETF will play as envisaged. So for whatever these aspects, these are the different, again, points on ground. How? So they will develop this NETF, and then on ground, there are different development, like Diksha is a major platform where the teachers' professional development is taken care of, and the exchange of resources and the resources is taking. Swayam, we know about, where the massive open online courses are run, so that anytime, anywhere, students can take up these courses. Even teacher development courses, faculty development courses are also run on these Swayam portals. So they want to look at all these. Generation of e-contents, uploading of e-contents, running of the courses, suitable equipment for suitably integrating these into teaching learning. So this is again talking about even the core and enabling infrastructure, what we talked about, that how these will be implemented in classes. Now, 70% of you, 75%, 70 to 75% of you have voted for this blended learning. Where will this blend? That is our experience. Even in the long going, that as an educator, we are feeling that it's okay to have this blending thing, because we found some of the advantages, for example, in sharing of resources. Now, the based on these policy and the allocation and setting up of the different committees and commissions by the government of India, it needs to work on the fact so as to, for example, reduce the digital divide, so that these aspects can be accomplished as envisaged. So these are the things, and these are the primary aspects of the National Research Foundations. So in terms of education, it will basically work on the AI research also. It will work on the research related to the incorporation of digital in any tools, the healthcare, agriculture, working on the mitigating the climate changes. So, it will incorporate the recommendations of the ministry based on the National Educational Technology Forum, and conduct pilot scales researches which can be scaled up after a transparent evaluation, etc. So this is what the things are talking about. What it shows, I'm just talking about the facts and figures and the implements which are there in the NEP 2020. So what it shows as the way forward is that it needs to work on all these areas. It needs to work on so that the affordable computing devices are available so as to reduce the digital divide. It needs to optimize and expand the existing digital platforms and ICT-based initiative, provide assistive tools for monitoring the progress, invest on creation of open, interruptible, evolvable digital infrastructure. Again, two-way audio and video. अभी two-way नहीं हो पाता है अगर हम उसकी बात करते हैं, जैसे एजुकेशन के चैनल्स रन करते हैं. So what happens there is, even if we are live, there is not much provision of a student sitting somewhere across the on the other end of the country to ask a question live. There is very lesser possibility. It does happen, but then how many questions also you can take? So there is not a two-way kind of communication, and that is why probably we also voted too less for the communication aspect when we talk about in the teacher to student thing. So this barrier of the screen we are not able to break, which is not there in face-to-face interaction. So educational programs to be made in different languages, and all these, the blended approach with online learning, change in pedagogy of online education. So these are the things which we as an educator and administrators and the government needs to work upon so as to accomplish the things which they have laid down in NEP 2020, if they want to achieve that. So at the end, I would just like to talk about some of the key initiatives which I could see that has happened. It has just been 1 year of implementation of NEP 2020. And it has, so these are the key initiatives on different things like blended models of learning or virtual labs or online assessment. So these are the areas where the initiatives, this is the categorization of the areas where the initiatives need to be taken. And some of the initiatives I'll quickly scroll through. There are many, not many, but there were a number of schemes that have come in. I could not take up all of them, but I'll just highlight a few of them, how it has been implemented, whatever they have laid down in NEP 2020. So one of the scheme is this Samagra Shiksha scheme. This is a holistic development of school teachers and children. So this schools, teachers and school children, this Samagra Shiksha scheme. And again, in this, there is a focus on this digital education. So they support this Operation Digital Bold in all secondary schools over a period of 5 years. They enhance use of digital technology in education through smart classrooms, strengthening of ICT infrastructure, digital initiatives like this Shagun and this UDISC Plus. So this UDISC Plus and Shagun is basically a collaborative and a networking platform where different schools, different institutes, they are also connected together to share the resources, etc. So these also need to be strengthened. So they exist, but they need to be reinforced. So this Samagra Shiksha scheme is reinforcing these things in terms of digital education, what we talk about. Apart from that, there are many other aspects which is basically related to that, and the development is related to that. So this is basically the scheme which was launched on 29th July 21, which is termed as the National Digital Education Architecture. So as you can see in this figure, this again, NDR aims to connect all the stakeholders of education, the teachers, even the parents, the students, the private enterprises, all the stakeholders, the government, they want to bring down to all one platform. And it was launched on July 2021. And around 25 crore school students and 94 lakh teachers, etc., they are on this platform. So it will again create a universality as well as the inclusivity. So you can, I have taken these things from the implementation report of these technologies. And as you can see, how it is NDR is going to benefit. So this is just the starting. They are going to fuel this. And when we talk about funding and when we'll talk about the limitations and the challenges, then one of the thing is actually to fuel these initiatives so that we can achieve whatever is laid down there. So this again represents the concept of this NDR, and where, even the content, different platforms related to televised, radio, offline, online, different stakeholders, the teachers, parents, governments, all are brought together and knit together in a network, so that that is what it aims at, to create this kind of a structure. And it has just been launched in 2021. Other is PM eVidya scheme. So this is again one of the schemes where it talks about the different initiatives such as the Diksha, Swayam portal is there, Swayam Prabha TV channels are there. Again, this special e-content for special needy children are also developed. So again, the guidelines have been formulated and released last year. So a lot of things under eVidya also, it is trying to propagate for the digital education. So this is related to the guidelines. It was launched on June 2021 on how to create the content, the e-content for special needs children. So, and again, teacher training is a very, very important aspect. So it is building the teacher integration of this education technology and ICT. So it is also running from April 2020 till date. And it is again propagated via various platforms. The platforms which are again on eVidya platforms such as the Swayam portals or the Swayam Prabha TV channels. So they are emphasizing on the digital literacy as well as the digital incorporation into the classrooms. So this is again, they are training, even in higher educations, there is a PMMMT funded, the academic centers, they are running many courses, many faculty development courses, which are enabling the teachers to have the literacy of the digital tools, as well as how to implement them into their classrooms on lesson plans. In fact, the last lecture which Vijita was mentioning, I talked about basically how you can incorporate these digital tools into the classroom for creating a blended learning modules. So, I took an example and showed that. So they are training the teachers to do that also. Recently, the education budget came out. I could not end this lecture without talking of the budget, because there were some important aspects on digital education they have talked about. So around 1.04 lakh crore allocation is for the education sector, which is a hike of 11.9%. But I should mention that, when Kothari Commission came in, or I think in fact it was before that in Wood's dispatch only, it was decided that 6% of the GDP will be allocated for the education. But we have never seen that 6 point to reach 6% GDP. Even last year, it was just 3.2% GDP allocation was there. So education needs fund. ICT needs fund. When we talk about these things, these are some of the concerns that need to be taken care of by the government. So undoubtedly, it is a hike, but still it is far less than what they anticipate to achieve by the, they anticipate in NEP 2020. If they want to have this technology or digital education per se, there has to be more allocation of the funds which need to be there. So this education budget, there was a lot of hue and cry upon this, the proposal to set up digital university. Although their aim, what they state is the digital university is to have the education accessible to all. So as again, the students can read and learn virtually, but this can only materialize if they are proposing to set up this digital university. Then they need to allocate a budget for the development of infrastructure in the remote areas, because this will again, otherwise it will just be an elite class or the middle class or the higher class, or technology enriched. It will just remain to technology enriched areas. So it will not uh, address the issue of digital divide or inclusivity. So they must ensure the proper infrastructure which should be laid out pan India so as to achieve these things. Again, this one class, one TV channel will be implemented. So they have proposed there will be a rise of channels from 12 to 200 channels. So right now in Swayam Prabha and EduSat channels, there are some 12 channels related to education. They will really increase it to 200 channels, also breaking the language barrier. So it will be in regional languages. In fact, the new education policy also talk about the education up till class 8 to be communicated in regional languages as well. So this one class, one TV channel, again, it has been saying. So as I said, so digital infrastructure in rural areas, they propose to have these vibrant villages programs. So on paper, everything looks good, but this needs to be implemented. While DTH access will be provided to Doordarshan, they will reinforce this BharatNet project for optical fiber network. Fueling needs to be done. Financial fueling needs to be done. It again proposed the focus on skill development and vocational learning. NEP also has a major emphasis on the skill development and vocational learning, which is again correlated to the job creations, also related to the job creation. Then high quality content by the teachers is also proposed. So there has to be a regulatory and there has to be curation, again, is very important. Not just the creation of e-content, but curation of e-content is needed. So they have proposed to actually train the teachers for this. They have also proposed the digital ecosystem for skilling and livelihood, which is Desh Stack e-portal, as well as talking about the virtual labs and skilling e-labs. So although in virtual labs, the personal touch will be very less, this is a major concern that you all have shown, and we have also experienced being a science educator, that the practicals, they could not be, it's not a good experience to do. But we talk about the point where, again, it's a kind of a thing that where you cannot have a running lab, then at least a virtual lab can give them the experience of something which they can have. So not a hands-on experience. So some kind of development of virtual labs is also they are talking about, and skilling e-labs. And again, in relation to that, they also talk about the allocation of this fund towards the National Tele-Mental Health Program. So they want to develop the mental health programs, and there has been some, I didn't touch upon all the initiatives that has been taken. I just touched upon some of the schemes and initiatives pertaining to the digital education as laid down in NEP 2020. But they do emphasize, I just wanted to put this point because they do emphasize, it does emphasize on this particular aspect, which is again affecting the education of the students as well. So this talks about this part. NEP 2020 recognizes the importance of leveraging the advantages of technology. This is again, I'm quoting from NEP 2020 document, while acknowledging the potential risks and the dangers. So they acknowledge that there are lacunae, they acknowledge that there are certain, because this is an immersive technology, this is a distracting technology. So they do acknowledge the potential risks and dangers. That is why they again emphasize on the carefully designed and appropriately scaled pilot studies to determine the benefits of digital online education. We had been forced to adopt this digital education, but whether it does make a change, we perceive. That is why I put perceive as well as experience, because some of the things that we experience and then make our perceptions, and some of the things because of maybe preconceived notions, we have a perception and then experience in that manner. But anyways, the pilot studies need to be appropriately designed so that actual transparently the benefits of this digital and online education can be learned, and only the aspects which are advantageous both to the students as well as to the teaching community should be emphasized upon. So because we have voted and we do think that blended learning is the requirement, so in blended learning, what aspect is online and what aspect is offline, so that we have best of both the worlds, for that the studies need to be done. Optimizing and expanding the existing digital platforms, all the platforms that we have talked about, and ongoing ICT based initiatives, current needs, using technology for online adequately to address the concerns of equity is what we talk about. So it does recognize that, but just writing in the paragraph is not enough. We do require that these things are taken into seriously before they propose a digital university. But before launching a digital university, they should adopt these points which are laid down, and these limitations should be addressed so that it can work upon. So some of the things I have talked about, I will probably end here, but I would certainly like all of you to write in the chat box. They can open up the chat box right now, to write in the chat box, hearing me, after hearing me for whatever 45, 50 minutes, what I have talked about, what challenges, what limitations, or what inhibitions do you have related to digital education as laid down in the NEP 22? So I hope I was able to deliver the components of digital education which is laid down in NEP, as well as I showcased the evolution of NEPs, so that you can see, you can correlate the changing times in terms of technology and the incorporation into of these aspects. So I would like to know your thoughts about what challenges you. So this is not the challenges I'm talking about, what you faced in the last 2 years. No, I'm not talking about that. The whatever reforms or whatever aspects they have put down in NEP 2020. What inhibitions or what challenges or what limitations do you perceive now? So I would like to hear from you now. You can write in the chat box related to them. Yeah, thank you so much for those concerns that you have put down in the chat box. I echo actually many of them. So I'll quickly talk about some of them. Some of them are questions. We'll take it after that. For this thing, my main motive was to actually get some challenges or inhibitions or limitations related to what I have talked about, or what is laid down in the NEP 2020 pertaining to the digital education. So one of the concerns that has come up is basically talking about the data privacy, cyberbullying, etc., as India does not have a sound data protection policy. Absolutely. When we talk about digital education, in fact, when we talk about any aspect of digital thing, then this is a major concern that needs to be there. Yes, it is not explicitly laid down in NEP 2020. And of course, I think that as such, they need to have a very robust data policy related to that, not only for education, but for all the aspects of that. So yes, this is a major concern that you have put across. Use of different languages. Use of different languages in practice is a challenge. Of course, what I have seen is that what I could look at when I was looking into all the initiatives that they have drawn and how they are incorporating into being. I think the more research or more funding needs to go into the different language friendly technology development also. So that is a major challenge because, when we are talking about imparting the education in local languages, that will at least promote inclusivity aspect in terms of imparting the education. But when we talk about digital education, then imparting is one aspect. The development of such tools is also a major aspect into it. So this different languages into practice is a challenge. The different languages, even creation of the softwares or creation of the books in different languages, audio books or visual aspects or all these kind of things is also a major challenge, and it needs to be looked into. Educating the educator is the biggest issue. Many rural, urban background, poor internet connectivity is another problem. Even in metros, people suffer from that. Digital divide is there, and that is why I keep saying that when they want to fuel this digital India, it was not a. I think I wanted to put across this webinar more as a educators discussing, the points related to what this NEP has, and where the emphasis needs to go in. So probably one day we need to have a white paper related to that, so that we can put across the recommendations to the government also. So this digital divide is a major issue, and it is going to affect in achieving whatever they have laid down in NEP 2020. Is it possible that after such a long time of, okay, this is a question, I would like to discuss this question just after I end this thing, that, what I could have had a poll also. But when people are opting for blended learning, then yes, because, as they say, they have now tasted, and educators are intelligent enough to identify the points which are useful in online teaching and the points which are useful in offline teaching. And that is why I think most of you and even I also propagate blended learning, because we can use the things which are advantageous for us and take both the modes. So it is not that their comfort zone lies in, yes, their comfort zone lies because of the, but to some extent they have undergone the kind of literacy that is required. So we don't know. I mean, it depends, but yes, they can take the advantages of both the worlds kind of thing. I worry that the digital agenda will be pushed, keeping only the urban privileged in mind. By the time the digital infrastructure is ready for the rural India, the social divide will become worse. This is a very, we all fear this grim situation. So whatever they have been incorporating, if it remains only to the privileged class, then I personally think that there is no use of it. What they have laid down at NEP, they want to put across holistic education. If a holistic adoption of NEP needs to be there, then this has to be done really fast. So in fact, it has to be fueled, and this can be fueled through Digital India. So because Digital India, when they are facilitating mobile banking, so they are providing mobile, so they are providing internet and financial services and healthcare services, so the education can also be provided to them. So this can be only fueled through the Digital India initiative. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. We are now okay. Fine. Health issues after online study. So this was one concern which I even, as a limitation, I put it across. So when we talk about this mental health programs, and that was my agenda to put that point here also, because when we talk about digital education, so not just mental, but physical health also, because I laid down that point because we all experience that. We all experience sore eyes. We all experience long sitting hours. We all experience these things. So one has to consider this point so that the physical as well as the mental health well-being is retained if we are going to adopt the online study as well. And the humanities, so I welcome that in NEP. Bridging the divide. So multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity is a very good thing. Technology addictions are becoming a problem. So again, because this is an immersive technology, because this is a distracting technology, so this wisdom also need to be incorporated in the communities so that they can make the most of it. Is it possible to carry out research in colleges? Research is an important component of NEP 2020. So again, this is a question pertaining, I think, to general research. As I said, the allocation to education and research in any case is not up to the level which it should be. Not even they are reaching the point which they only said that it should be 6% of GDP. So because the funding is lacking, then obviously there are lack of things that is happening. Infrastructure, rural areas need to be before trying to utilize these schools. Absolutely. About the, okay, again, another question is here. So Vijeta, I'm taking the questions which are in here and I can then just tell me. In accessing student learning management system portal as a result of poor network provider here in Africa. So thank you so much for joining from Africa. But in many parts of India also, we are facing the same situation. So even for past 2 years, we have been running almost online. There was a brief period in between where we got the chance to take some practical, etc. So after even 2 years, this challenge is a major challenge. And that is why I said that the administrative levels and even the government levels need to work upon reducing this digital divide before it can actually perceive or foresee that these policies or these recommendations are holistically achieved. So they need to do that. So of course, this challenge even in India we are facing. Students are experiencing headache and migraine problems after continuous and so much screen time can be damaging to the eyes. I completely understand with you, completely agree with you, Jayashree. And yes, that is again a big challenge. And that is why, blended learning is the thing. We need to take the advantages of both the worlds and then we need to adopt it. We have seen the mushrooming of, gaming and all these things also in past. So not only for education, for recreational activities also, people are destroying their health because most of the things are now virtually. People are immersed in gaming technologies. So a general awareness, a general regulation on the usage of the technology needs to be there. Not just for education, but I think in a very broader perspective also. So thank you so much for letting me discuss certain points. And I hope I could rationally and reasonably present the ideas of digital education, which is laid down in NEP. And as an educator myself, discuss some of the points and highlight some of the limitations and challenges that needs to be worked upon before we can holistically achieve these goals. So thank you for your attention. Over to you, Vijeta.
Thank you so much, Charu, for such a detailed, for sharing such detailed insights into both the history of education policies and also the history of digital education and how we have come, where we come from, and so on. And I see that it's been a great discussion and a very engaging discussion so far. And I know that you've covered a lot of points already that the audience have posed. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of issues that still remain, digital divide being the very, 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 very biggest point yet to be addressed. But now that we have begun to, thinking about implementing the policies, several state governments have started implementing the policy. Do you, in your experience, do you see a plan coming up to see how this digital divide can be addressed with whatever resources we currently have? I don't know when when the infrastructure will really develop. But is there some plan going on how we can proceed further?
To some extent, what I personally feel is that, many of the things, there is implementation first. The planning is there on the paper, but on the groundwork, the planning needs to be done. So like one of them said that, by the time it will reach rural India, there will be a societal divide. So the infrastructure needs to be developed. So as far as, for example, university is concerned, there is a framework that has come into being. There has been, adoption of even the curricula is coming into being related to NEP, not just the digital education. The curricula is coming, it is adopting, every other university is now adopting this NEP. The administration actually have to work on the ground level to provide the facilities. I do think that it is in their agenda, but because of this pandemic thing, again, we were not even sure when are we opening, how are we opening. So right now, what I can say, because Delhi University opened today for offline classes. So abhi to, like, we are struggling to come back to the offline mode. So once, I think that when they are adopting these things, they need to chalk out the things in terms of resources, in terms of infrastructure. They need to fuel that, and then only the implementation will be proper. Otherwise, everything on paper would be proper, but actual thing, we will not be able to achieve that. So there will be challenges. It's a bumpy road ahead. But I think that, after some bumps, probably we are going to be on the track to achieve or reach our destination.
Thank you, Charu. There's just one more question that we had received via our registration form. Valentine asks, what does the NEP recommend with regards to immersive technology? So I'm picturing that this is about having, students being more interactive in the classes, perhaps, or having some sort of, developing these abilities. So.
Obviously, when it talks about developing the digital pedagogy, when it talks about developing the digital literacy amongst teachers and students, and again, fueling the education technologies that are coming up. So it does talk about making most the use of these technologies in imparting the learning. So it is not giving explicitly the plan. Like, for example, if there are certain MOOCs which are running, so the students can take up these MOOCs which are there. So then it talks about the credit banks. It talks about the credit transfers. So implicit, implying there is a usage of technology, but it is left to the educator that how it is going to incorporate that, and there where the importance of training comes in. So obviously there will be certain they should again train the teachers, a chunk of teachers first, and then training the trainer kind of a concept they should develop, so that the use of this immersive technology in the classrooms can be made more useful. So the NEP lays down the emphasis. It does not gives you exact plan how to do it, but yes, it does lays down the incorporation of these tools, etc. It does talk about even the AI, the machine learning, the smart boards, or the assessment systems as well. So it does talk about, like, again, identifying the areas, the thrust areas, doing some pilot research on it, and then implemented on a pan-India scale.
Thank you so much, Charu. If we have no further questions, I see a hand raised. Ranjan Kumar, would you like to ask a question to the speaker? Okay, I guess there are no further questions then. In which case, Charu, first of all, let me thank you for joining us today and for such a wonderful discussion. I would also like to thank our team members Suchibrata Bora, who is the program manager, digital initiatives at India Bioscience, who has been interacting with our audience through the chat box on Zoom, and also Zille Anam, who is the program coordinator outreach, who has been the host on YouTube and LinkedIn. Now, before we all leave, I have a few quick announcements. Just a second, let me quickly share my slide. And I think, the interaction by the audience today has been really fantastic. And I'm so happy that our audience could, join us today and have this interaction. And, in spite of colleges being open, and I think they are already in this kind of a rush of going back to the in-person mode, and they could still find this time to come and join us today. And I'm very thankful to all of them. So before we end this webinar, I quickly wanted to make a few announcements. Well, first of all, we will soon be having a series of online events that will explore the lives and work of scientists in an informal chat session. So this is called the In Conversation with Ignite series, which is being jointly organized by Ignite Life Science Foundation, Cactus Communications, and India Bioscience. The first event of this series will happen on the 28th of Feb and will feature Ajit Varki, who is a distinguished professor of medicine and cellular and molecular medicine from the University of California, San Diego. The link for more details and registration can be found in our chat box. The other event is our 14th Young Investigators meeting that will happen between 4th to 6th of May this year. And all of you in the audience who are in the early years of conducting independent research can apply. And the last date to apply is 25th of February this year. So please let us know what you thought of today's webinar. And do keep an eye on our website, subscribe to our newsletters, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube to stay updated with our latest activities. Thank you once again for joining us, and see you next time. Bye.